Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Society of the Eternal Mile podcast. I'm your host, Noah Sias. On today's episode, we're joined by guitarist Greg Hinck. You may be familiar with his work from the band the Anza Bowl from Austin, Texas. Follow the show on social media at SOTEM Podcast. Subscribe where you listen. Leave a review if you enjoy the show. And show your support on Patreon at patreon.com/SOTEM Podcast. Been a little light on the announcements for the past few episodes, kind of rolling through the dead period of the year for a lot of bands. In a few weeks, I'll be running some mini episodes with previous guests from last year to check in and ask a few questions that weren't asked for 2017, so be on the lookout for that. So on to today's episode. My first interaction with Greg was essentially this episode. I've been familiar with the Anza Bowl for a couple of years now, and previous guest of the show, David Gant, has brought all three of his projects through Greg's studio, Chop Harder Studios, this past year. I enjoy connecting the dots between guests whenever possible just to show that no matter how vast the metal market is, there's always a solid chance it only takes a few networks to tie it all together. Had a great chat talking about the Austin, Texas scene, his history with audio production, and where things are heading next. Here's my conversation with Greg Hinck. Greg, welcome to the show.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
When did you first get involved with music?
As far as playing is concerned, I want to say it was like maybe 5th or 6th grade. I had a friend who we grew up skateboarding together, and then randomly he called me one day. I mean, this is back when you called a house phone and stuff. He called me. It was like, I got a guitar. I was like, okay, cool. Like I didn't know. And I remember going over to his house that weekend, and he was learning to play, I want to say it was like the acoustic part of Cemetery Gates from Pantera. And I was like, okay, I need to learn how to do this. Like, this is sick. I was totally into it. And then I want to say it was Christmas that year, I got the classic kid setup of an acoustic electric, a crate 15 watt, and I took my Christmas money and bought a DOD grunge pedal and just went from there. Like, I took lessons for a little bit, but they were very loose lessons where we'd show up and my teacher would be like, well, what do you want to learn? And I just show her, songs that I wanted to learn. And she taught me, how to read tabs and stuff like that. And I went to her for maybe 6 months probably. And that was pretty much it. And after that, we just cruised on and kind of went by ear and learned a lot of stuff just by myself from there.
Who were some of your early influences? For
sure, in the beginning, it was like 100% Metallica. I vividly remember listening to the Live Shit Binge and Purge like box set or what have you. I had borrowed the double CD from my friend. I remember going to guitar lessons the next week being like, how do you write a riff? Because, Metallica was like land of riffs back then. She gave me the answer that I think you see echoed everywhere, but it's just basically you find chords you like and then pick notes out of those chords that you like and add a rhythm to it. I mean, it's obviously more complicated than that, but that's pretty much it. It was like my earliest one was Metallica. And then I didn't have like a big growth in what I listened to for a long time because no one I knew really listened to metal. So from my guitar teacher, I learned about Metallica and Pantera and Megadeth. And then it was literally, I would go to Guitar Trader that was across the street from my guitar lessons. And I would just ask the guy, like, what's heavier than this? And then, I remember it was kind of like a hopscotch of like, I found those bands. Some dude at Guitar Trader at Music Trader was like oh, check out Fear Factory. And that was the first time I heard like downtuned guitars. I was like, oh, okay, I really like this. And then I came back the next week and he showed me Machine Head, More Things Change. And hearing that first riff on that from 10 Ton Hammer, I was like, oh, okay, I really like this sound, like the low tuned guitars. And then by that point, it was like high school, I think, by that time. And of course, that's when Korn like blew up and all those bands, Korn, Mudvayne, Slipknot, were all huge.
Yeah, the biggest inside job of the music industry, in my opinion. It was this big controversy because we all remember going to school, and if you said you had Korn or you had Limp Bizkit or even something as mild, in my opinion, as Tool, like if you were rolling with those tapes, or if you were even lucky to have a CD player with that in it, your ass was in trouble.
Yeah.
And parents are outraged, and yet people with more money than we'll ever see were in complete control of that whole situation.
Yeah. It's funny because my parents I couldn't buy anything with parental advisory on it. So my friend had like he unbeknownst to his parents got the I think was it BME, the music subscription thing you used to be able to do?
Yep.
He got that, and he got like Korn, Life is Peachy, Limp Bizkit, $3 Bill, the first. He got all those ones, and I had just the old school, put it in a CD player and record it to tape. And I had tapes of them unlabeled at my house. Is how I listened to them.
Bootlegging it big time.
That was the best.
If you had to name one record that changed everything for you, what would it be?
Like when I was a teenager, for sure it was hearing Life is Peachy. That one got me started. I would say a real close follow-up would have been White Pony.
So you're originally from San Diego. What were some of your early bands out there?
The first band I had, I was maybe 15 or 14. I don't think I could drive yet. It must have been 14. It was like a crummy rip-off new metal band. It was super fun. And then there was one band in San Diego that was like the local band, Well, there was like two of them, but this band called Turum that I wanted to be in, I was obsessed with. They had like, it was one of those, there's bands that have all the best gear, write good songs, they're like as close to the cusp as you can get, kind of a thing. I was like, oh, I need to get in this band. So I hounded them on their message board and stuff like that, and ended up getting in a long time later. But that was the last band I was in, and that band kind of turned into from Turum. Part of the people quit, and that turned into a band called My Battle Axe Needs New Grip Tape. And that's where I learned a boatload about writing music, playing music. Started learning about recording. That was like the most growth period probably when I was younger, was that band. We never even played we played like one backyard party or whatever. We had a practice space and played all the time and recorded a bunch of songs. There's like 2 or 3 hours worth of songs sitting on my iTunes back when you used to program drums and Fruit Loops, blind export an MP3 and take it to my friend's house who had GarageBand and record the guitars there. Like that. It was fun back then, man.
One of aside from when you're real little and you're dicking around with sound recorder on like Windows 98 or whatever, my earliest DAW that I can remember using, and when I got this, I thought I was so cool. I was using Cool Edit Pro 2. Now, I don't know if you ever had the privilege of using that program, but my God, thinking back now, what a piece of shit. how recording music has evolved is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone from when uh, I got to college in 2003, and I saw they had audio production class. I immediately signed up for it, showed up, and the first project we did was in Pro Tools. I think it was like LE or something. They had one HD rig that wasn't really hooked up to anything. They were really only using it to edit audio for video. Everything else, they had, two 8-app machines and I don't remember what the board was. But the first project we did was edit the Gettysburg Address in Pro Tools. Our instructor set it, all screwed up to the point where you would have to move words around, create letters and sounds from existing sounds to make what should be there and stuff like that. That was 2003, but that was it. That was the only thing we did in that class on Pro Tools was that. Everything, there was no other way to use. We recorded on the board and up to 8-app tapes, and that was it. And then now, like, come to my bedroom and I got more, plugins on my laptop than.
Right. I mean, there's entire plugins and suites and bundles dedicated to doing exactly what that class was trying to teach.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah.
So you took a break for a little bit to focus on being a paramedic, and you found yourself in Austin, Texas. What was the attraction to Austin?
So, like, in 2004, like that old band I was in, Battle Axe, had stopped playing, and I didn't have anything to record music with, or I didn't even have a computer at that point, I don't think. I had gone to EMT school and became an EMT, and then went to paramedic school and became a paramedic, and was just doing that 4 days a week for the city of San Diego. And all of us kind of fell off. Everyone from that group and era fell off doing music. And then, because I didn't have any money, I couldn't really afford any gear or do anything. So my friend had a setup, so we would occasionally record at his house a song here or there, but it was really sparse as far as that was concerned. I still had a guitar. I still played at a Carbon DC 700 that I would goof around on and write songs, but nothing really got done. And then because my pay was so low and I had to work so much overtime to try and make ends meet, we started looking elsewhere for jobs as a paramedic. And Austin pays a lot more and the cost of living is a lot cheaper. So we moved out here in 2011, and because I had all that expendable income, I was like, oh, I'll start, buying gear again. So I bought some monitors and laptop and an Apogee Duet, and started getting into doing recording again. But it was just by myself, and I had Superior 2.0, and I used all the stock plugins in Logic and went from there. But that's when things started kind of happening again.
How would you compare the San Diego scene to Austin's?
I don't know how it is out there now, but when I lived out there, there wasn't much. I mean, POD and Local H were the biggest bands that really came out. I mean, I guess Blink-182 technically came from there too, but everything else was nowhere near what it is here as far as musicianship or professionalism or aspirations or anything. And a lot of tours skipped San Diego because I guess there wasn't much of a market, at least in the metal world. If it were the biggest bands have come through, I remember going to see Fear Factory and Slipknot and all, the biggest bands from back then. But, smaller bands usually would skip it and go to LA and continue up the coast. So from what I remember, I mean, there was nothing, at least nothing like here. Here's crazy.
Right. Well, I would almost imagine that if you were from San Diego, the focus would be LA.
Yeah.
Because you're not even that far from it. Even now, there's really only one legit venue out there, isn't there? And it's Brick by Brick or whatever.
I don't know if Brick by Brick has improved. Brick by Brick, when I played there, was literally a fucking brick tunnel. I mean, it was a rectangle that had a stage at one end, and it was truly all brick. The biggest thing there was Soma.
Okay, and Soma. Yep.
Soma would be where all the big regional bands, like we saw Killswitch Engage, and that kind of level of band.
As you mentioned in our pre-interview talks, you said that you slowly fell into the scene after moving to Austin. Who were some of the locals cutting their teeth at the time?
So when I want to say 2012 was when I first started putting out ads, like in Craigslist or whatever, and I was just looking for people to come over and just like write songs with. And at the time, I didn't get any response, at least from my ads. And I was listening, like I want to say like Periphery or North Lane, or maybe they hadn't even broken yet. But the bands that I was listening, like there was no response, so I assumed there wasn't really much, and I didn't really look into it too much. I just kept on doing my thing, and by like 2014, the next year was when it started. Because I put another ad out and met this guy who came over with his guitar. We're in my studio, and he saw that I had a box for a fight stick for playing fighting games, and we never even played guitar together. He was like, "Oh, dude, let's play fighting games." So we didn't play fighting games, but his friend was Nico from Insurgents and Never Bloom, and I can't remember the name of his band he had before with Dom. He was like, "Oh, my friend is looking for somebody to program drums for his EP," and I was like, "He was like, you want to do it?" I was like, "All right, sure." So I'd never met Nico. All I knew was that he boxed with my friend Richard, and that was it. So he shows up one day, and we programmed drums, and it turned into Never Bloom. It was originally I would just program the drums and hash it out so he could, I'm assuming, show somebody to do, and then go do a real recording somewhere. But, we did 4 songs or whatever, and then he was like, "I'm going to make this a band." And I was like, "All right, cool." Like, he was like, "You want to play bass?" And I was like, "Sure, like, whatever. I have a bass." But I still had no aspirations of doing anything at that point other than, just kind of following where it went and having fun. And he was like, "Yeah, we're going to play shows." And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I don't know why I was so adverse to it. I don't know if I even thought anything would happen to it." But through that, we started playing shows with Never Bloom. And that's how everything kind of really snowballed from there, because I think that was the first time I met like Dave and Dustin and them from Filth. Was playing a Never Bloom show with them at South by that year, and I met Anthony from Come and Take It Productions, the guy who, creates the metal scene here by putting on all these shows for us, and met Daryl, the singer from the Anza Bowl. I met everybody from that, and then that's where it just snowballed. Because Nico's like, "Let's put on an EP," and I was like, "Okay." I don't really know what I'm doing mixing wise, but like, I'll see what I can do. So I went to YouTube University and started like, how to mix, how to master, and just tried to find everything I could. And this is before, like right now, you can watch a song that came out last month get mixed live, on Nail the Mix, the Joey Sturgis site. Like, it's crazy. And that's not like they skip it; they go through everything. But even just 3 or 4 years ago, it was like you were scouring Gear Sluts or looking on the Sneap forums and endless Googling and like trying all these weird things and random message board stuff. And that's pretty much how the Never Bloom EP got done, was me just like, looking up how to do this or how to do that or.
Right. Well, I think everybody's been there, and
Yeah.
and it's funny too, because it's almost like I'm sure we've all watched like the same handful of videos where it's like it's this one dude who like, oh man, he literally goes through the whole drum set, or it's like, oh man, he's literally using like the slate drums right now, and that's what I'm using.
Yeah.
All those different. Oh, and then like the never-ending like journey for tone. You get so stoked on one thing, and then you watch a different video with someone else, and you're just like, man, I literally just wasted 2 days listening to this dumb asshole talk about something that's not even relevant anymore.
I don't know. Well, it's funny because like I took maybe a year or 2 years of audio production class in college, but none of that's relevant now. I mean, the things other than the basic principles of like miking and gain staging and EQ, that's it. Everything else is like totally different in how to, I guess, like what's expected of a commercial recording at this point. You know, like that whole world completely changed in the time frame of me taking a break from music.
So you credit Neverbloom as being the band that paved the way for your audio production career, like you've talked about here. Since then, you've produced several bands through your company Chop Harder. When did that start to become a regular gig for you?
Things started to kind of, people would ask me here and there, but I was kind of nervous. And you know, I mean, with Nico, it was like with Nico and everyone else in that band, like there was no expectation that it was gonna be you know, it wasn't gonna sit right next to Will Putney and, you know, Wizard Blood mixes, you know. It was like, I'm gonna do the best I can and we're gonna roll with it. And for that style of music, it kind of worked because, you know, it is what it is. You know, Neverbloom was a raw kind of Norma Jean-esque style band. But then I had a band come to me that wanted to do more of like a polished sound, kind of like the earlier Volumes things with a little bit of hardcore tinges in it. And they came over and they'd be like, "Oh, can you do this?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And then like 10 minutes later, I'd be like, "Oh, hold on, I gotta go to the bathroom." I'd go to the bathroom and fucking Google on my phone, like, all right, reverse snare. Okay, cool. And I'd kind of like real quick figure it out, and then like jank throw it up, and then like reverse engineer and really learn it later on. But that was how things first went. Like I had two bands that came in, they would ask me stuff, and I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And then you'd be like, I gotta figure this out after they leave, otherwise I'm fucked.
that would have been really funny if it would have been like every time that like they asked you something that you weren't sure on. Sure, 1 second, I have to go to the bathroom. Like that's a running gag or something.
Yeah, but I just rolled with, you know, I mean, I worked, you know, working in the recording studio as far as pressure environment is concerned doesn't begin to compare to like, you know, having a mangled body in front of you on the side of the freeway and like you have to go, like let's fucking, you know. So right. Like, you know, I was like, all right, cool, like whatever, I'll figure this out, you know.
I totally get that analogy with it too, because it's like, yeah, you're having to deal with stuff right now, like 2 seconds ago, actually.
Yeah.
And so really, yeah, you probably don't lose your cool on any sort of like high pressure situation when it comes to audio.
It's like Banjo Kootenai with like a $20,000 budget, like.
Right.
But from it kind of slowly like built from through the Neverbloom, and I did a couple other local bands, and then I did the first Anza Bowl album. Was the first one where like I had really had time to try and kind of learn a couple of things and get used to doing things a certain way to some degree. I mean, like the mastering channel on that one, it was literally like a complete trial and error of like 10 different things I'd read different places and how to do this or how to do that, and using you know, presets that came with it, and just kind of like trial and error like crazy. And from there, that's when other bands started coming to me that I wasn't a part of on a consistent basis. Like I did the first Bury the Rod EP, I think was the first thing I did after the first Anza Bowl album. It's kind of snowballed. So now, you know, like David Gant's bands, plural, are coming out from Carolina to come record here, and just gone from there. It's pretty sick. I've had some remote mixing jobs where people sent me stems, and you know, bands coming in from all over to do stuff. So it kind of just snowballed from there, and then kept going.
So we've been talking about all these other bands, and you just kind of picked up on it here. So let's talk about the Anza Bowl. How did that come to be?
The Anza Bowl started with one of the first people I met was Daryl, our singer, who was a singer for Neverbloom. We were in a band for like 3 weeks. We wrote one song. I remember Daryl came over to do the vocals. He sang once into the microphone, and I was sitting there at my desk like, holy shit, like, this dude can sing. So I immediately was smitten with Daryl. That band fell apart immediately. I told Daryl, I said, hey man, like if you ever want to come over and record vocals on some songs for fun, let me know. I'm down. I'm down. So I kept kind of writing songs and was getting going doing that. And Daryl and I started working on like an EP, basically. It was just 5 songs. We recorded vocals for all of them. You know, thinking like, we could probably do better. So we started over again and wrote the first album. But there was no aspiration. It was strictly a studio project just for fun. Just doing whatever we wanted to hear musically. And we put it out, that first album, Binary Dreams. And like the next day, Anthony from Come and Take It was like, I will put the Ansible on stage if it's the last thing I do, kind of a thing. And a couple months later, he hit us up and was like, if you get a band together, I'll give you a show with the Contortionists and Tesseract in December. And this was like, I want to say May or June. It's really like, oh shit, we're not going to turn this down. Like, fuck yeah, let's do this. It turned immediately from a fun project that was just a musical outlet to like, holy shit, we can't fuck this up. We're going to play with the Contortionists, like one of my all-time favorite bands. So then it was, you know, build the band. Darian, our drummer, moved here from Minnesota. Chris Crow, our guitar player, we had known from doing his podcast, the Austin, Texas Metal Podcast, for Neverbloom. And then Nigel, our bass player, played in another band in town called Roma. And then everyone came together and we played that first show. And it's been like, we played that first show in December. We went out on the road with David and Invoker in January of that next year. And like, it's just been kind of fun stuff ever since then. Kind of resetting the bar of like where we want to try and go as far as aspirations are concerned.
So the band has 2 releases, as you've touched on, 2015's Binary Dreams and 2016's Draw Closer. Had the chance to listen to Draw Closer this morning in its entirety, and solid release. We've already kind of talked about Binary Dreams and how that kind of started. How was the response to that release?
It was cool. I mean, at the time, in Austin, there weren't many. There was like death metal and deathcore and hardcore. You know, like there was Insurgents and there was Bury the Rod, and there was a lot of bands doing that. But there weren't, at least that I knew of, any bands that were really doing like a progressive metal kind of thing. So it's been nuts, man. I mean, we played with a ton of my favorite bands and toured around, and I think we finally settled into our sound at this point as far as this new record is concerned, because the first one was just like try whatever. There was no rules. It was like whatever riff I write, let's turn into a song. Screw it. Draw Closer was a little more thought process of like, because we played songs live that they sounded cool, but they weren't really fun to play from a player standpoint. I'm sure you've experienced that. And
oh yeah,
you're like, oh, these riffs are sick, and then you're like, holy shit, I don't want to play this live. Like, you know, you're like, whatever. You don't think about it. But then Draw Closer was kind of a reaction to that, where I was like, I should just try and, if I can't have fun jamming this in my room, standing up instead of sitting down at the computer, then it's probably not worth it. Then this one is like the kind of mix of all of that, of like the more intricate stuff that I like and enjoy hearing, mixed with like kind of the broader strokes.
Was the reaction good for Draw Closer?
Yeah, that one was really cool. Just because that one opened up a lot more doors for us to go do things.
What's on the docket for this year for you guys?
We head out in March with a band called Chernobyl The Secret. It's also another Austin band, and a band from LA called The Mirage Theory. Little run, and then we're just going to finish the album and see where it goes from there. We have the guys at Pinup Artist Management helping us, and behind the scenes stuff to see how far we can take it. I mean, I'm up for whatever. I'm enjoying kind of getting to the end of it. At least all my guitar parts are recorded and done, and it's really just on the vocals now at this point.
I think one thing that everybody always forgets, like as far as like fans or, you know, anybody is concerned, just hearing you say that made me think of when we were doing the current Bermuda record. So many people forget that it's like, as soon as the current record is out, you're already starting on the next one. You know, and so people forget that it's like, hey, just because it's new to you, it's already dead and tired to us, yeah. You know.
Yeah, this record to me, I mean, I love it, but and it gets a new. There's this thing where, especially if you record your own music, you get so used to hearing the music that you're bored to tears of it. But then when you do vocals, it gets a whole new life for a little while. You're like, oh, sick! Like all this extra energy and life is breathed into this, and you hear things differently because of how the vocals interact with it. It's like a whole new experience. That's short lived too, because then you spend a while editing vocals and mixing and doing all that stuff. So like you said, by the time the record comes out, if you do it yourself, you're totally just over it. Like I don't want to.
Yeah. All right, so let's switch it over to some gear talk. What's your signal chain looking like these days?
Pretty straightforward. It is. I have two Stephen Carpenter signature model 8-strings, one for each of our tunings. That goes into my Line 6 wireless, into my Axe-Fx, and then into my Matrix power amp. And then that goes into. I have a Carbon Legacy cabinet from when I want to say 15 was when it was first purchased.
Nice.
So it's an old cabinet. It still has the same original speakers and everything. It's crazy. It sounds really good. So we're still rocking. Although I think we're going to upgrade. I'm tired of lugging around 4x12s.
Right.
We're going to get some 2x12s. I'm not sure what yet.
Right. Get some nice 2x12s and put some scrims in front of it. They don't need to know.
Yeah, no, nobody cares.
Any items on the wish list?
I'm sure anyone who's into amp modeling wants the Axe-Fx 3. I mean, I want it, but I'm kind of like, I mean, how much crazier could it possibly get? I mean, the amount of updates we have on Axe-Fx 2 is absurd, and it sounds ridiculous. And a ton of records you listen to don't even have real amps on them anymore anyway, so.
Right. I feel like between the big three, unless you're someone who absolutely wants to claim, hey, I used this specific amp and this specific cab, the big three got you taken care of, and you can probably fool most people.
Yeah, between Kemper, Axe-Fx, and the Helix, between those three, like, what else do you really need?
Right. All right, opinion question. What's something that you see young or inexperienced players doing with rigs that drives you nuts?
It's not so much the rig itself, it's tuning. I see bands play all the time that are out of tune, and it drives me crazy. I mean, our other guitar player, Chris, he's gone through multiple guitars trying to find one that can stay in tune and hold the tune and work in conjunction with my guitars. We tried a whole bunch. I mean, when we first started playing, he just had Agiles because it was just a necessity of him getting guitars at a cheap price point so that we could just play. But now he has like a custom Daemonis. And we finally sorted out all of our tuning and intonation issues, and everything sounds nice and tight. But man, seeing bands play live and the tuning it's like it completely destroys any immersion in the music for me. I'm immediately just like, it's all I can hear. It's like, oh my god, it's so out of tune. It's terrible.
Yeah, my favorite is when the band is out of tune, and it's like, okay, maybe it's an awkward situation where maybe they had a string break, and it's like, okay, gonna try to get through the rest of the song, and then when they get that chance to tune, they're gonna take it, and then they don't take it, and then it's another song where it's just like it's even worse. And it's another song. And then the entire tour package is just like, can you hear this goddamn band right now? Awful.
Well, there are a lot of people will be like, oh, the Line 6 Spider amp with too much gain in the row. That's whatever. I mean, some bands go for that sound. But tuning, holy shit.
All right. So let's have a discussion about the Eternal Mile. When was your first tour and what was the lineup?
I guess it was January 2016. Invoker. And then they had brought a couple other members to swap out in the classic Gant mode of Impale the Betrayer. And then I'm trying to think of what Of Ruins from San Antonio. That was us three. And we did 3 dates. I don't really remember where. It was like a weekend warrior run, but it was super fun.
To date, if you had to guess, how many shows have you played?
I have a folder on my computer that has every flyer where I've just saved them all. Probably 35 shows. Not many. But I've been lucky. They've been with I've got to play very few shows, but a lot of them were with huge bands. It's really fun.
Of the shows you have played, any favorite venues?
The new Come and Take It venues, unbelievable here in Austin. That place is just, the sound is really good. There's tons of room backstage to hang out. There's room to set up and warm up, and there's plenty of room for merch, and there's plenty of outlets for everyone to plug into. Like those are like big things. And then there's a good bathroom there too. That's my favorite one, hands down. I mean, I guess everyone's favorite one is their local one, but
The new Come and Take It is damn near every episode. Everybody mentions that. All right, so the staple question for this year on the show has been about Warped Tour. What's your thoughts on Warped Tour coming to an end, and is the aging demographic going to be an issue for bands in the lower and middle class markets?
Warped Tour ending sucks. Just because the amount of good bands you can see in one day is super fun, and how readily available all the bands are. I mean, you go high on your bus, but a lot of bands are just out walking around and totally down to just shoot the shit and get punished. You'll see kids punishing people, but it's cool because, that kid paid his, whatever, $20 or whatever, and get a sunburn and come out there and, talk to Andy from Every Time I Die or whatever. They're just cruising around chatting. It's really cool. And the speed at which the day goes, because you show up and it's a different lineup every day. I always thought that was cool too for the bands themselves playing. Like, oh, today we play it not the best time, but tomorrow we play it the perfect time. Or I thought it was really cool. It's a bummer because I had a lot of really good experiences growing up. I remember seeing Glassjaw on right after the Worship and Tribute album dropped on Warped Tour, 2001, I think it must have been. It was incredible. It was one of the best performances I've ever seen from them, and they broke up after that, but it was so awesome. And then recently I went down, my friend Kyle drum teched for Finch on the 2015 Warped Tour, I think. So I went down and hung out with him at the San Antonio stop and saw a bunch of great bands and hung out backstage. It was super fun. I'm sure something will take its place, though.
With the reason for Warped Tour being gone, Kevin Lyman was saying it was because of low turnouts and the demographic that they're used to seeing getting older, instead of staying the same. Do you think that's going to be an issue for bands, at the lower levels moving forward?
I think it's definitely an issue for any band that plays an instrument on stage. I mean, if you look at what's crushing it right now, monetarily and exposure-wise and everything, I mean, you have bands boycotting the Grammys because they don't treat rock, metal, or etc., with respect. But I think that's just a byproduct of what their market research has shown people want to watch. So I think a lot of bands that play instruments are kind of, you're going to have to really do some good stuff and really differentiate yourself to make a mark, because, I mean, if you look at, there was an article the other day that said Migos has more number ones than the Beatles at this point, So, clearly there's a shift in what people want to hear and what's really popular. I mean, that fucking Ghostmain video, I saw probably every other day somebody would share that on my feed, of him just rapping there in front of the mic, that first one that really got circulated around a lot. That was every fucking day on my Facebook feed. It's crazy how fast and how successful. I mean, that dude's blown up. If you follow him at all on social media, he's playing to sold out venues and stuff all over the place. Not small ones, he's mid-size. That's probably just the nature of how things are going at this point. You're gonna have to really rip some good stuff out to rise above and be noticed and make a mark.
Now time for some of the worst moments in your career. Any horror stories from the stage?
We played in Bryan, Texas. The Anza Bowl, like most modern bands, pretty much runs on rails because we have laptop that has backing tracks and clicks for our drummer, path changes for our Axe effects, and pushes MIDI to the lights. Like, our show, unfortunately, lives or dies on our laptop,
Right.
whether or not the laptop lives or dies, you know? And there's a lot of bands that are in that same boat. And there's one thing that can happen that is super simple and easy to overlook when you're trying to troubleshoot in a pressure situation. We played Brian. It was the last song of our set. It was one of those awesome sets where we hadn't really played in Brian before, so people didn't really know us. And when we first started playing, there wasn't a lot of people. And by the time we were done, like, there was a whole crowd up front, and people were really reacting to it. And it was super fun. Like, up until this moment, it was a fucking amazing show. We were having a blast. Like, this is, it was like the dream where, like, you see the room fill up while you're playing. And then something happened, and our bass player Nigel went behind his cab to, like, adjust something, or something happened, and pulled one of the USB cables, unbeknownst to him, out of the laptop. So we were still feeding front of house, but there was nothing feeding our drummer the click in his ears or any of the references about when the song would start or whatever. So I start hearing the backtrack from over the PA. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, here we go. Last song. Let's crush it. And then Darian's counting, and it's just a 4 count for this song. And we get to 8, and I'm like, all right, something is terribly wrong here. So I'm like, I'm just going to watch Darian, and hopefully we all figure it out. And Darian comes in. Darian's like, fuck it, I don't even know what's going on. So Darian just comes in, and we kind of all like, it's like throwing a band down the stairs as far as like the sound was concerned, like a jumble of whatever. We couldn't figure out what was going on. We had no idea. It was super embarrassing.
I have a similar story. I've had that happen before where my drummer, we didn't think we were gonna get an encore, so I think he didn't have the greatest show for the main set, so he like ripped his stuff out, and everybody's like, one more song. I'm like, all right, cool. And so he like gets back on the kit, and he didn't realize that he had unplugged his in-ears out from the main line. He's like searching, like all frantic, and he finally gets it back in, but something's weird with the signal. It was almost like he was mad and he like messed something up with like his end.
Yeah.
And he was getting like, one side was completely out and the other side was like really muffled. And he gave us a 4 count, of which he started on 2. And I am literally just like, oh my God, this is about to happen. And my other guitar is literally, well, it started as 1 beat ahead, and by the time it was done, it finished before we did. But then that one sucked, but thankfully the crowd wasn't too huge. The one that was real embarrassing was when we were in Spokane, Washington, and actually going back, the show I was just talking about was at the Underground in Mesa, Arizona. And so anyway, we're at the Pin in Spokane, and had a great sound check, and I always put up indicators inside of Cubase when we're doing front of house like tests so I can just loop it.
Yeah.
Well, guess what my dumbass forgot to do before we went on? I kept the loop on, and it was it was literally right at the beginning of like the set, like our first downbeat that was just, really heavy. And of course it's set up to such a bad loop pattern that it was like looping like a bar and 3.5 beats. And at the time I did not have, like, we were not stoked about our drummer that we had. And I'm looking back at him like, you dumbass, what are you doing right now? And then I look at the computer and it's like, oh man, I suck so bad right now.
I have the same thing. I have a loop set up on the first song right before the first bass drop that also has some of the ambient texture tracks that we have on the backtracks. And I always look at it, I'm terrified of like not disengaging the loop in Logic and just letting it rock, because it would just destroy. Yeah.
15 seconds to figure it out. Like, we're still trying to play.
Because you're like, you can't stop playing, and your brain's just going like exploding inside of your own head, you know?
Yeah. How about the most random thing to happen at a show?
I've been a paramedic now for 11 years. I have seen everything from birth to death, and everything in between. From like, I've literally seen dead children to, everything you can think of. I get so fucking nervous before we play every goddamn show that anything could fucking happen in the crowd, and I probably wouldn't notice it. Like, I am so lost in my own little world of anxiety before we play that when we do start playing, like, it's just mostly a visceral experience of like, okay, am I playing the right parts? Am I hearing the cues? All right, cool, and then it's done. And like, who knows what random shit could fuck go down, and I would not even notice it.
All right, that's fair. So I'm curious to hear what advice you'd have for a few groups of people, and for starters, let's do local bands.
Don't rush it. I think that, I would love to like have a do-over and like have this album that's coming out be our first like, exposure to the world. Like I said, like I feel like it took us 2 years to like figure out what exactly we wanted to do, how we wanted to meld our influences and how we wanted to express ourselves, and all like aesthetically, musically, all that stuff. Like, take your time, get good gear. People say gear doesn't matter, but it does. There's a big difference between the band that walks on stage with, and knows how to use, like if you were to take just a bass player. If you were to take a bass player that walks up there with like a single 15-inch speaker Guitar Center Special versus the guy who, and if both players know how to play everything, but if the dude walks up with, a solid 8x10 with a compressor that's hitting a dark glass, that's hitting a 30-band EQ that's dialed in just right, you're going to get blown out the fucking water. So, take your time, get the good gear, learn how to use the good gear. That's impossible to tell anybody, though. I mean, you only learn that and realize that in hindsight. No amount of, like, somebody else telling you to slow down would ever fucking slow you down.
Right. How about promoters?
Well, we're kind of spoiled here.
Yes, very much so.
Like, Anthony is super fucking cool. Treats everyone with respect, and there's no shenanigans. You get your cut of the tickets every time. The whole experience here, like, spoiled it for everything else, where you're like, the dude comes out and he's like, well, I got $20 for you. And you're like, all right. I mean, that's really sucks, but like, and thankfully I'm in a position where like if we're on tour and like shit goes south, like I can bail us out, but like a lot of bands don't have that. So like, there's a lot of very readily available evidence online about who's good and who's not, because now with Facebook, I mean, I see people get tagged all the time and all sorts of crazy nonsense about this person did this or this person did that. I mean, listening to when Filth was here, having them tell me stories about their last tour run, where like some promoter was like just telling them, just beat me up, I don't have the money, like, and then Pete was out of the parking lot in his car. Like, expect the worst, I guess would be my my advice. Have your own backup plan. Don't rely on them, because you'll show up and there'll be like no promotion whatsoever, no locals added, and you'll play to like the two old people who just drink at that bar.
Lastly, how about bands hitting the road for the first time?
Baby wipes, number one, for sure. Extra money, for sure. Walmart parking lots, for sure. Taco Bell Wi-Fi. And just be mindful of, it may be the first time you get in a van with the other people in your band. That it may be the first time you guys are together for more than 4 hours at a time. So be respectful.
Before we go, let's do a plug for the Anza Bowl. Where can people find you guys?
We're on Facebook at the Anza Bowl. We're on Instagram at the Ansible.atx. We have a Twitter, but we're not really on it. Those are the two big places. Big Cartel. We have a little store. You can get some merch, get some albums.
And real quick, let's do a plug for Chop Harder Studios. Where can people find more information?
If you go to Chop Harder on Facebook, I have a site there for the studio. You can message me on Facebook.
Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show. Best of luck with the Anza Bowl and Chop Harder Studios this year, and hopefully we'll be chatting again soon.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
That concludes this episode. I'd like to thank Greg for coming on the show. Be sure to check out the Anza Bowl and all other bands mentioned on today's show. Also, don't forget about Greg's studio, Chop Harder Studios. I've been your host, Noah Sias, and as always, thank you for listening.